Now, major developments and building projects could see soaring costs blown out even further because of union efforts to significantly boost their members' take-home pay. Sky News has seen the Electrical Trade Union's latest confidential enterprise agreement, which sets out a whopping 17% increase to the base salaries of its workers, with a raft of new allowances to push those figures higher still. Investigations reporter Jonathan Lea joins me now. Thanks for joining us, Jonathan. You've got hold of this enterprise agreement. What sort of conditions are contained in it?
Well, good evening to you, Chris. You're certainly going to be happy if you're a member of the Electrical Trades Union. You probably have reason, though, to be concerned if you're a taxpayer or you're a person looking to buy a project which has been constructed by union costs or union labour. And just to be clear here, if you're talking about union labour in Queensland, or at least southeast Queensland, anything basically which has a crane or is in a prominent position, you can expect it's going to be dominated by the union workforce. And that isn't altogether a bad thing. It's just the cost that comes with that, and often the delays which are a party to it. We've looked at this latest agreement. It comes with a 7% pay increase this year to 5% pay increases the 2 following years. That's 17%, but that's really just where the allowances start. You can see there a so-called site allowance. Basically, the bigger the site you work on, the more money you get in terms of an allowance every hour. You work on a small site, $50 to $100 million, it's only a couple of dollars. But if you're working on something like the Gabba rebuild or perhaps the Cross River Rail over $1 billion, you get an extra $11 in your back pocket every hour for what appear to be the same skills. It's quite extraordinary. There's also a multi-storey allowance. If you work on levels 1 to 15, you get an extra basically $1.50. If you work on levels 61 and over, you get an extra $4.40 in your take-home pay. Before tax in your pay. When you start to look at all of these rates and things like allowances to pay for your tolls, your parking, getting to and from the job, you can take a salary, if you're a senior Sparky, from basically $3,000 a week and add an extra $1,500, $2,000. It's quite extraordinary.
It is amazing. And when those site allowances and other allowances increase for the height or size of the project, if you're on a very costly high-rise project, you could be getting $15 an hour on top of your salary in allowances. Now, is there any justification for this, or is it just a money grab?
Look, I'm sure the union is doing a very good job at compensating its own workers. We spoke to the Meriton boss, Harry Triggerboff. He's a billionaire property developer. He made the point that he avoids unions. He thinks that Queensland's unions are as bad as Victoria's unions. He says he doesn't quite mind working with those in New South Wales, but he avoids them at all costs. When I put some of these allowances to him, he was quite frankly shocked.
Rubbish. It's rubbish. You see, the government is very weak in Queensland because they need the Olympic Games and they need the infrastructure. The politicians will not fight unions because unions are labour, that's why.
We also spoke to the former Premier Campbell Newman, who makes the point that somebody has got to pick up the tab.
We're paying a premium for jobs that are union sites. Any of the top developers in Brisbane will tell you that high-profile sites, they will be union controlled and they will be more expensive to build, a lot more, 20 to 30%.
Chris, perhaps no great surprise that the union didn't want to participate in an interview for this story. I was surprised, though, that the Master Builders Association also avoided talking to us. What, though, taxpayers need to be thinking about is the enormous cost that's going to come with the Olympic Games. All of these projects, the major projects, are going to be dominated by union labour in Queensland. Very frequently, they are behind and they are over budget. And you start to get an idea of where the extra money goes to. And one of the other allowances which surprised us was that it was double rate if you worked in the rain. Basically, if it was over 35 degrees, it was no work, it was cessation. It was over 29 degrees with high humidity, again, not working. And if it was rain, it's the old water drops, tools stop. And if you're asked to do work in the rain, it's double rate, which is quite extraordinary in Queensland considering how often you think it pours down here.
Yeah, great story, Jonathan. Thanks for that. And I tell you what, you're so right to point to the Olympics and talk about how much all that's going to cost. Thanks very much, Jonathan Lea there live from Brisbane. And if you think, oh yeah, Harry Triguboff can pay for all this stuff, remember, it all gets sheeted home to you in extra costs. And as Jono pointed out too, in government costs as well. So we'll hear more about that in the future, no doubt.